Hey Muses, welcome to the Mixed Muse, a space for reflection, reclamation, and real talk through a mixed race lens. You can call me Mixed Muse, your multi-generationally mixed host, and here we explore identity, culture, and the quiet complexities of being beautifully in between. If you're drawn to nuance, honesty, and a little shimmer in the truth, you're in the right place. So hit that and subscribe button. Today, we're going to delve into talking about race without absolutes and why it's so hard, why it matters, and how we can do it with more grace and clarity. So, you may have noticed I've been quiet since my last video. Life got pretty busy for me. It wasn't because I was discouraged. In fact, the responses to my second upload was overwhelmingly positive. I'm passionate about talking about race, and I do it with a lot offline in my work, with friends, and with family, but content creation is still something I'm figuring out in my journey, so hopefully you can be patient. So let's dig in. I've learned that just bringing up race makes some people anxious and tense. Even before I open my mouth, my chest tightens and my mind races, and I even worry, am I going to say something controversial? Will I be misunderstood? Yet there's this sense of purpose in me. I know I have to speak because race touches everything: love, education, work, culture, even policy. It's everywhere in America, and if we don't talk about it, the silence speaks for us. The tricky thing is that I never know how people will respond. Offline, folks tend to engage thoughtfully. Even if there's pushback, it's more subtle. Online, not so much. It's easy to be misread, or I've even been told I'm anti-Black, even though I embrace my Blackness every day. People forget that multiple things can be true at once. You can love being Black and talk about the complexities of being multiracial or adjacent to whiteness. That's why I refuse to reduce myself to one side. I'm multi-generationally mixed, or MGM for short. Both of my parents are mixed, and I'm of Caribbean descent. Some people see me and assume I'm Afro-Latina or Afro-Asian. Others just see a Black girl with good hair. The truth is, I'm all those things, and I'm proud of it. I've got ancestry from just about every continent. When I look at photos of my great-grandparents, I see those features in my own face. To me, that matters more than a DNA percentage. Identity isn't a math equation, it's how you connect to your heritage. And see, this is why I push back against absolutist language. In one of my videos, I talked about a mixed race creator who's three-quarters white and one-quarter Black genetically, and he's Louisiana Creole by heritage. Some commenters pressured him to disown his European heritage because of slavery, and others suggested that being proud of his white ancestry meant celebrating oppression. But not every white person's family came from slavery. My own white ancestors were immigrants who had nothing to do with that system, and Louisiana Creole's history is more complicated than a single narrative of violation and rape and white supremacy. There were arranged relationships like placage, free mixed communities, and centuries of intermarriage happening. So it's not just super linear. So I'm going to read some YouTube comments that were under my video, and you can even go and watch that video. Please support it and look at my analysis. So here we go. So if you want to look at the exchange for yourself, please feel free to, but I'm just gonna go ahead and read it. So the comment from 1357, I'm not gonna bother with that. So this person replies and says, the comment had absolutely nothing to do with whether or not he was proud of his ancestry, and they had everything to do with whether or not he's proud of the horrible things his ancestors have done. And he agreed with it, and you agreed with it. And what makes this even more funny is that his death colonizing, slave owning ancestors would have put you and him either to work as a slave or put you all to death. And I saw this, and honestly, I wasn't shocked that I would get a comment like this because I'm pretty used to racial discourse for my many years being on the internet. So I just simply responded to that, of course. Acknowledging your ancestry doesn't mean you endorse its sin. Mixed people didn't choose who created them, but we can choose not to live in shame about it. That's the point. And I thought I made it pretty clear in that video, either way, that this isn't about celebrating the horrors that happened in slavery. But to put shortly, this guy is three-fourths white and he presents that way. I just don't see the point in shaming someone who's one grandparent away from being fully white into claiming blackness when that may not be their lived reality. This guy already says he's mixed. I don't really think that's a betrayal of blackness. All right, so let's continue. So then I get a reply from 1357. Now let's apply this to white people, lol. Again, that person did not ask if that person was proud of having white ancestry. They asked if they were proud of coming from horrific abusers, and that person said yes. Try again, sweetie. Those white descendants of those colonizers and enslavers still hate you, the same as the white ancestors did. And just like how those white ancestors didn't claim you all and would have enslaved you, their white descendants who are alive today do not claim you and go into the voting booth and vote against your own well-being. So this person, I guess, is a woman, just based on the language that's going to be used later on, is trying to use this language to make me feel rejected and unclaimed by white people. And this is often an assumption that people make when they hear mixed race content creators or people in real life say, hey, I'm mixed race. I'm proud of my heritage. It's not about celebrating the horrors, but it's like, what are you going to do about that if maybe that is in your lineage? But even then, I already addressed in that video that not all of us come from slavery and people who rejected us. Because once again, it's not about trying to be white or trying to center whiteness, but it's just about, hey, I'm a mixed race individual and I exist and I'm here. It doesn't really make sense to reject something that is true just to appeal to someone if that's not your lived experience. So, in a nutshell, that was my comment that I replied to this person. I said, being mixed isn't about seeking white acceptance. It's not about celebrating injustice. It's about refusing to disown parts of our lineage just because others wanted to feel guilty for existing. Our identities are not defined by who would have claimed us in the past or present, but how we choose to walk through the world now fully and honestly. And I even said that, expand on this in my next video, but I'm trying to be empathetic to this person because I understand that maybe if you don't know what it's like to be in between multiple cultures, because clearly this person is monoracially black, people tend to think that our existence is just bound on getting acceptance somewhere or trying to fit in. But when we're balanced within ourselves as mixed race people, we're not seeking acceptance from anywhere. Not white, not black, we're just mixed and we just are. And we can support both. We can talk about our lived experience in any culture that we're a part of. So then this is where she's like, girl, the collective majority of black people in the Western Hemisphere have white genetic ancestry. But if a relatively unambiguous black-looking person with a 17% white genetic ancestry went around calling themselves mixed, a whole slew of so-called multi-generational mixed people would be calling that person a liar or saying that they're not mixed. This is why the multi-generational mixed thing is not really the hot hill to die on. All right, so this is the typical we're all mixed talking point that this commenter is saying. And they give an example of an unambiguous black person with 17% white genetic ancestry from admixture. And to be honest, before I go into my next response to that, I just feel like this is just someone trying to argue for argument's sake, because for the most part, most people who have underneath 20% ancestry from somewhere else, they're not really walking around calling themselves mixed anyways. And this person just says that all these other I'm assuming that they're thinking of light-skinned people or people who look unquote mixed race. are going to reject this person because they're Black. So they're saying that this is not really a hill to die on. When it's, what does that really have to do with someone who's multi-generationally mixed claiming their identity? And then even if you're an unambiguous person who happens to have 17% white DNA in you, what does them rejecting you have to do with your identity or your lived experience? I feel like that's up to you to decide at the end of the day. So, in my response, I said, I'm curious because that's a specific scenario. Is that your case? If so, do you believe that there's meaning behind 70% white as a Black person? Did you feel like it made sense or things clicked for you? Or is it just distant percentage from a culture you can't see yourself ever relating to? If it's not about you, in all honesty, I think it depends on how you're connected to it beyond numbers. And on a side note, I'm opening up my approach because even though typically I wouldn't expect someone who is unambiguously Black with a small admixture to identify themselves as mixed, you never know. Because a while ago, I actually came across an article. I forgot who published it, but I may actually do a video on that once I find that article. But I actually did do an article, and you can Google it in the meantime, that scientists found that about, even though humans are all 99% genetically similar, race is really just a construct. But I believe in the article they said that they found that 12% admixture is where it can affect your phenotype. And 12%, that's about the same amount of a great grandparent mathematically. So some people, they may say, oh, you have to be half in order to be considered mixed. You have to be a quarter, or a quarter is too little. Or some people have rules when it comes to the Black community. Hey, most Black people already have admixture, they're technically mixed. But if you have to be at least 75% mostly Black to consider yourself Black, things like that. But I'm just letting you know that scientists may have said that 12% might make you mixed. So if I want to be technical and accept this as truth, then who am I to say that someone who is 17% white can't identify as mixed? They could very well have a great grandparent who is white. So that would mean they would have a mixed grandparent, and they could have known that grandparent. And that person may have shared their lived experiences. So, and that could very well reflect in your phenotype, right? Because for instance, me, I have about 10% Asian DNA. That's split between Indian and Chinese. And some people might say that that's too small to claim. You're barely even Asian at that point. You're not a quarter Asian, you're not half Asian. But when I look at pictures of my great grandmother, who is Indian and Chinese on my Jamaican side, I look just like her. I have the same eyes, the same nose, very similar facial structure. And if people ask me, because people do ask me in real life if I'm part Asian, what am I going to say? No, I'm not Asian. I'll be honest and say just a little bit, that's it. But I'm going to claim my heritage. So that's the way how I see it. And this is why I'm open in my response. So back to the comment. I say to her, phenotype plays a huge role in racial identity, but it's not the only thing that shapes your experiences. It's also not only dependent on who claims you. Being mixed race isn't a hill to die on. It's a lived experience shaped by many factors. So if you're a monoracial person with distant admixture, I can understand that you may feel like there's no point. But that's not my perspective, because it's not just about having a percentage. It's me. It's about my family, my culture, how I look, and what I've inherited, and what's even shaped my personality and preferences. You may be rooted in one thing, while others have different races and cultures influencing their day to day, especially when we have family from all around. And then she begins yelling at me. She's like, and what mixed race culture is someone like Vanessa Williams identifying with? Black people like her have distant white genetic ancestry. They have zero working relationship with the white racial identity or white culture. They don't have white parents or even grandparents who could have taught them a mixed culture. Look up the Black American actress, Freddie Washington. For all of the white genetic ancestry that she had in her veins, she maintained that she was raised a Negro, and oh, that's a typo, and that she knew nothing of any other culture than that of American Negroes. That's my point. Beyonce has no working cultural relationships with her white French Canadian ancestry, regardless of how much of it she has in hers genetically. And you simply cannot say that Creole culture is proof of her mixedness because there are straight up black and straight up white people in the South who have that same culture. By your argument, my family is full of multi-generationally mixed people. You can look at them and see the white genetic ancestry. Yet they know no other culture than that of Black American culture, which, funny enough, is a culture that itself is a mixed. So I can see here this person mentions three public figures, three celebrities who are clearly mixed race. They acknowledge that they have white DNA inside of them. And each of these people actually did acknowledge that they're racially mixed, but they identify publicly as Black. If I'm not mistaken, Beyonce did acknowledge time and time again that she is mixed race. She has Black, white, French, and Native American ancestry. And there's proof of her acknowledging this in commercials and stuff like that. Freddie Washington, I believe, she is an actress and a civil rights activist who comes from two biracial people. And at that time, they had the one drop rule. So, of course, she had the option of passing herself off as white, but because she cares about her community, she decided to politically identify herself as Negro. Vanessa Williams, I think she took a DNA test and it came out that she's, I think, about half white. Even then, I understand that there's a difference between just being racially mixed, but then your culture plays a big part of that too. And even this person acknowledges that Black American culture is an amalgamation, it's mixed, and they even say themselves that they have multi-generationally mixed people in their family. So I'm trying to understand what exactly is their point. I feel like because that person, I don't know how they look, so my analysis can only stop there, but it seems like they feel rejected by people who embrace being mixed race, or they feel like there's something stopping them from being mixed, or because they don't feel like they can identify as mixed race, or that they only know Black American culture and nothing else, they want other people to just say they're Black, because I feel like she's trying to assume that we want to get closer to whiteness or we want to be privileged and step on other Black people, which isn't the case. So that just goes to show why this is heating up on her end, this conversation. So I reply to this and I say, while I agree that African American culture is a mix in itself, blending African and European influences, I find it interesting that you acknowledge your family is full of multi-generationally mixed people, yet insist they only know African American culture. That raises the real question. What's the deeper issue here? So, without going through into all of that about Beyonce and Freddie Washington, I let her know that my experience is different because I'm not African American nor monocultural. I was raised within American culture and multiple West Indian cultures, and I have two mixed parents, one socialized as Black and the other as white. My heritage has shaped me into the person I am, and I can't discredit only one culture. I'm sorry, I meant to say credit, not discredit. So I can't credit only one culture, race, or one family member. My father would historically be considered a quadroon, raised primarily by his white mother, while my mother, who is predominantly Black with Asian ancestry, was raised in Jamaican and Cuban cultural spaces. And I let her know that I've already touched on this in my intro video. It seems like, and I'm gathering from her comments, it just doesn't seem like she's really familiar with my channel, or if she even really listened to the current video that she's commenting under. So I said, it's perfectly fine if you're MGM or you come from an MGM family, but feel no connection to mixed identity because blackness is all you've known. But that's your lived experience. It doesn't erase nor diminish mine or anyone else's. And reaffirmed that being mixed is my reality. And that's why my channel exists, to offer space to people still navigating these nuances. So I also let her know that I don't support her coming onto my page trying to dismiss my identity or the identity of other mixed people simply because it doesn't mirror her personal reality or some of these other public figures that she's naming. Just because some of these other people are visibly mixed and decide to identify themselves as Black, why does that make you feel anger towards people who are multiracial and want to stand in that identity versus just choosing one side? Because the issue was choosing one side, especially if you're someone who's ambiguous, maybe you're white presenting, you face a lot of issues, actually. It's not as simple as, oh, I'm white passing like Freddie Washington. Freddie Washington is a public figure. What about people who are that creator, Carteron, who's just a regular person? People assume he's white, and he lets people know that he is Louisiana Creole and he's mixed. A lot of times, some Black people are going to be like, no, you're not Black, you're white, or whatever the case. Even in my experience, I can speak for myself. There's times where people push me out of Blackness because for whatever reason, they're just like, and this is not to say like, I always have negative responses from Black people when it comes to my identity. I have lots of Black friends, I have Black family members, Black coworkers, and people receive me well usually. This is not a space where I'm going to be like, oh, Black people are always jealous or whatever. This is not that. I'm just saying that there's people who do see me as different, and I may have, and I'll get into this a little bit later, that sometimes my experiences are different from other Black people who, especially if they're darker than me or have more Black features, and they can't relate to my experience or when I offer solutions in some other spaces, which I will delve into a little bit later. And I also say to her, and honestly, what do you even gain from trying to invalidate my identity? Just because your family had been affected by the one drop rule doesn't mean we all want to live like it's pre 1967. So why react so viscerally to people standing in their truth? Because let's be honest, we didn't pass these laws and get through the civil rights movement to just stay the same. So if people today want to acknowledge that they are mixed race, they are both white and Black, or Black and Asian, or Latino and white, or whatever, people should be allowed to do that. Because by you trying to make it an issue of people not wanting to claim themselves wholly, to me, it's giving you're actually centering whiteness, or you're trying to keep things pure for white people. Because it shouldn't mean that we're trying to chase privileges or step on other Black people if we're just claiming our identity. People may say there's privilege and things associated with that, and I get it, and I do think those things are true to an extent, but I don't feel like I'm just getting extra points everywhere I go, if that makes sense. I don't have extra points for putting multiracial on my driver's license, for example. But how people receive me, that's up to them at the end of the day. So she responds to me and says, girl, if you're a West Indian and the children of biracial parents, that's completely different from having white ancestry from slavery, sis. And then she's like putting all these laughing emojis. Oh my gosh, I can't speak. But she's putting all these laughing emojis and all caps, he's yelling, and it's like, wait, what are you saying? Because why are you moving the goalposts? What did you think MGM means? Did she think it just means, I don't know, light-skinned people who happen to have a little bit of white in them? Clearly, she used examples like Freddie Washington, who's genetically half white, half Black. Vanessa Washington, half white, half Black. Beyonce, I don't know, but her mom is clearly Creole. MGM was never a term that was just exclusive to American people. And I don't know, maybe she's thinking of a different ethnic group. What are they called? The freed people, of the people who descend from free black and biracial people that live in the DMV area. Maybe she's thinking of that. But no, MGM is not exclusive to that. And so she says, and by bringing up my family is to say that the Black American community is literally full of people that you would refer to as multi-generational, simply due to the fact that they have white genetic ancestry, period. And the reason I say that they only know Black American culture is because, drum roll please, Black American culture comes out of the history of varying different racial ethnic groups mixing. We are one people. The mere fact that you are perceiving Black American culture as simply being the culture of people who are simply Black, and you assume that them simply being Black must mean that their culture is not an amalgamation of European, African, and Native Indigenous stuff, proves that even you don't really have the ability to grasp the complexity of the mixing that took place within the Western Hemisphere during the period of the transatlantic slave trade. This is why I keep saying this multi-generational mixed stuff is completely nonsense for the most part. So it seems like she just really doesn't get that. She probably thinks that someone who claims to be multi-generationally mixed is basically the same as someone who is just Black American. And I disagree with that because there may be overlap in some areas. And while it may be true that a lot of Black American people are mixed to a certain degree, I think there definitely is a huge difference between someone who just happens to have some distant 17% admixture in them and it doesn't reflect in their phenotype versus someone who comes from a long line of people who are mixing together, because that's usually what I think of. I could be wrong, but that's usually what I think of. And those are usually the types of people in these spaces that identify as MGM. People who either have one biracial parent or people who come from a long line of people mixing beyond just the parent level. I don't know. It came like, again, she wants to emphasize that even she has some mixture in her blood or in her culture. So, what is the issue with me or other mixed race people acknowledging that we're mixed and we decide to say that we're mixed instead of just Black? And she says, but if you're arguing that someone who is multi-generationally mixed is someone who has two biracial parents, well, let me go back to my other point. The people that I named, the actress Freddie Washington, Vanessa Williams, and Beyonce, are not multi-generationally mixed women. They are Black American women who happen to have higher rates of white genetic ancestry than some other Black Americans who have less white genetic ancestry. But the collective majority of have white genetic ancestry. So before I get into the next part, let's not ignore the fact that you also had a lot of mixed race people back then who only intermarried with each other to keep it that way. So they may not have a white parent or even a white grandparent in sight, but at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that they're still mixed. That's just the way how I see it, because even then, a lot of that was intentional. So she says, but the collective majority of have white genetic ancestry, which according to you would render the collective majority of us multi-generationally mixed already, and yet we still only have one ethnic identity, which again, that's not true because you have different groups of Black people in America. Not every single Black person in America is Louisiana Creole. Not every single Black person in America identifies as Gullah Geechee. Or what about those group of Black people that I mentioned that are descendants from free Black and biracial people in the DMV area? So again, not everyone has one collective identity. If you have one identity, some people are just Black American. They don't really have this other ethnicity attached to it, and that's okay. But I just don't agree with that either. So they say, but of course, you would not at all call the average Black American multi-generationally mixed, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of us have non-Black genetic ancestry, and we have a singular cultural identity that is literally an amalgamation of varying cultures coming from different racial ethnic groups who mixed amongst themselves from multiple generations and created a singular identity. Cringe face. And that's also what I'm confused about. Why is she cringing? And no, I actually do not want actual mixed people to identify as Black. So that is so strange. So she goes from acknowledging that Black people under a collective identity are mixed and have a mixed culture. And then she goes on to say actual mixed people. She doesn't want actual mixed people to identify as Black. So it's like, which one is it? Are Black people all mixed? Or are you upset that actual mixed people, quote unquote, actual mixed people, are choosing to identify as mixed and not just Black? What is this, a competition? She goes on to say, I just know that most of their MGM BS is being centered around Black American people's identities, and you all will traffic in anti-Blackness as you include Black Americans with white ancestry from slavery into this convo. So I don't think this person is really communicating in logic here. It just sounds like they're upset that there are people who identify as MGM instead of just Black American, and they don't want us to acknowledge that some people who they will claim as just Black American as also MGM, when it's like you can be both at the same time, just like how you can acknowledge that Black American people can both be mixed and also just collectively decide to identify as just Black. Then why can't you see that MGM or mixed race people, by saying that you're mixed, it's already in the title. You're not just saying you're white, you're not just saying you're just not Black at all. You are mixed. And they say Beyonce literally isn't mixed like you. But what if she is? Because if all Black American people are mixed, her father, Matthew Knowles, he's dark skinned. I have a dark skinned mother and she's mixed. He could very well have admixture in him. And Beyonce's mother is clearly like Louisiana Creole. I don't know what her percentages are like, but she could very well be mixed like me. And then she goes on to say the mixed race ancestry comes from a period of enslavement and the 1800s and all of that. So she says, one thing that was telling was, but again, so-called MGM people like you would never look at a Black American like Mary J. Blige and call her multi-generationally mixed, despite the fact that she surely has mixed race ancestry that could be verified through autosomal DNA testing, and the cultural identity that she possesses is quite literally a mixture of cultural practices, customs, and traditions coming from varying people groups that historically held different separate racial identities centuries ago. But again, I'm sure anti-Blackness prevents you from ever arguing that Black Americans or a Black American like Mary J. Blige is multi-generationally mixed. Though everything about our racial makeup and cultural identity quite literally ticks all of these MGM boxes. So even though in my last response, I'm like, oh, I think you're honestly confused, and I included it there, and I'm just giving an open-ended response. If you want to be Black, if you want to be mixed, it's really up to you. I'm not here arguing with you over who's Black and who's mixed or whatever. He literally came to my channel with this argument that had nothing to do with my video. My video was specifically about that creator and why a mixed race person shouldn't be ashamed of their heritage. And it seems like, first of all, I also want to make a point about the Mary J. Blige thing, because she's assuming that no one would look at a dark-skinned person and claim them as mixed race, when there are mixed race people who are dark-skinned and people acknowledge them. I know my mom, she's not a half Black person or whatever. Like, she's predominantly Black, but people acknowledge her as mixed because they can see her features and they can see her hair. With Mary J. Blige, maybe the main reason why people won't look at her as mixed or claim her as mixed is because, does Mary J. Blige ever say that she's mixed? I don't recall Mary J. Blige ever saying that she has a white mother or a white grandparent or whatever the case. There's people like Ryan Destiny, Justine Skye. There are dark-skinned women who could pass as black, and I've seen people acknowledge them as mixed, and I see them get posted on mixed girl pages and things like that. The exotical space acknowledged them as dark skin exoticals, brown skin exoticals. So that's completely untrue. But the thing is, like, she came to my page and she's arguing with me based on an absolute, based on an assumption that she has experienced in her life. Maybe it sounds like, since she says she comes from a family of multi-generationally mixed people and it's all in the culture and everything, and I can see that she's passionate about this topic. Maybe she's dealing with her own identity issues and feelings of rejection. Maybe she sees herself in someone like Mary J. Blige and wishes that she had a right to identify as mixed race. She never answered my question if the 17% white admixture thing was about her or not. But either way, I see that because of her feelings and her judgment against mixed race people, and it could stem from lived experience that she has went through, unfortunately. She missed the point of my video, and she is just moving the goalpost to argue about Black American identity and dismissing my identity when I never made any statements, even trying to blame people like Beyonce or Freddie Washington and reducing their blackness in any way, shape, or form. I made a video that was centered about a creator of Louisiana Creole descent who's white presenting and is mixed race. And as we know, a lot of Louisiana Creole people are mixed. And so I see that how personal experiences, feelings of rejection or afraid of changing society's ways of labeling others, it can cause us to jump into conversations with assumptions and absolute language instead of having productive conversation. And then I'll also read one more question that I found in my comment section as well. So this other commenter asked, how can white/black biracial people embrace their true identity when white people outside of immediate family do not claim them? And I responded and I said that I love this question and I'm very excited to talk about this in my next video. Please stay tuned. So here's what I will say to that. First thing, why does it matter if white people claim us? And even then, what does claiming look like? Is it the same? Should it look like the same as when black people say that, oh, you're mixed, but you're still black at the end of the day, or you're going to be a Negro to everyone else? Me as a mixed race person, I'm not looking to any white person to claim me as a white person like them. I may be mixed, and even when I say that, hey, I'm mixed or whatever, if someone asks me, I don't really experience anyone saying, oh, well, you can't say you're white. I even remember in school, I was talking to these girls, and one girl asked me, oh, by the way, what are you mixed with? And so I told her, and I mentioned that I had Irish ancestry. And one white girl over there, she was like, oh, you're Irish too? High five. And that's happened multiple times. So I'm not really sure, what does this person mean by claiming? Do you want people to say that we're just white? Do you think claiming looks like that? I just haven't really been told by anyone who said, oh, you can't be white or you can't have white in you. I have close white friends and family members, and I'm not just in feeling like I need to choose where to hang out at or whatever the case. But maybe that'll be something that I can delve into deeper when I talk to my other mixed race friends, because I'm sure that our experiences they're varied. Even my father had his own experiences feeling like he wasn't white enough, feeling like he wasn't black enough. I've heard all these things, so that's something that I'll definitely delve into as well. And who knows, maybe the person who made that comment, maybe they're mixed race as well, but for the most part, I think this is a monoracial person who made that comment, because I just don't really see the opinions of random white people mattering about my identity because I just don't center race in my life that much. I like talking about it and connecting the patterns, but I just don't see it as, oh, who accepts me today? Anyways, I think we definitely have to stop assuming that everyone's ancestors were one thing and that everyone descended from the same trauma. Because who's to say that we just don't feel claimed? Mixed people deserve to embrace all parts of ourselves without being told that we're erasing blackness. And similarly, dark-skinned Black people with a small percentage of European or Asian ancestry can choose how or if that matters to them. It isn't anyone's place to decide who counts as mixed. And absolutism shows up in other places too. Recently, I took part in a racial equity training for advocates. And the facilitators, they were very young, but they were well-meaning. But what I didn't like was they kept saying things like, white people always have power, and they had different examples of the different types of racism, like personal racism, structural racism, things like that. And they're saying things like the police will always be on their side. Now, I understand structural racism is real, but hearing always and never erases the resilience and agency that we have. And I feel like that can prevent us from even exercising our rights. Because my mother is a dark-skinned Black woman, and she's experienced racism sometimes, and she's never let it stop her from going to certain places, bringing us to certain schools, or standing up for herself when needed. Even when faced with harassment, she makes sure that she calls the police first and makes it clear who the aggressor is. And you will be in spaces that are predominantly white people or Jewish people or affluent, and she will still exercise her right. We have a right to use the law to protect ourselves, and sometimes we just need strategy, not just resistance. And some people might feel triggered by me saying that, or they might think I'm sounding naive, but that is my lived experience. And this is what I've seen as my mom. She's someone who can just pass for Black. I don't, people, to a certain extent, people may be right that a police officer is not going to look at you and say, oh, what are you, before racially profiling you. But I'm letting, as someone who has seen my mom deal with these situations and seen how they played out, I come to this racial equity training and I'm like, that is just wrong. Don't ever just say white people always have the power or the police will never be on their side and they're always going to go to the white person who's being aggressive towards you first. Because the scenario they gave was basically a typical white Karen harassing you while you're out on public property, park or something, enjoying yourself. And what I noticed about the scenario, it's an actual video. Some guy wasn't walking around in the park, and this older white lady tells him that he can't be there and she's gonna call the police and whatnot. And I noticed the guy's recording her and they're going back and forth. And yes, he has a right to be there, but I would just say in that situation, he should call the police first, make sure he describes her so they know exactly who the aggressor is. And I'm not saying that I guarantee it's going to work in his favor, but I believe that we should still exercise our rights and not just assume that white people, or even if you're a dark-skinned person and you feel like, oh, there's a light-skinned person in the room, don't just assume that you have less power in that situation. Because that's also why I feel like people become triggered when we start to talk about race. And then they let their own personal insecurities cloud productive conversations from happening. So when I shared this in the racial equity training, I shared my thoughts and I said that we should approach this with strategy rather than just believing that we're always going to be powerless when it comes to personal racism. And the facilitator accused me of centering whiteness because I also did share that I even seen on TikTok about a young Black lady who shared that she was being harassed at work. She works in corporate, and a white woman was harassing her. And so what she did was she decided to cry and played the stereotypical damsel in distress. And she said it actually worked for her. And mind you, this woman is a dark-skinned Black woman. So it's not just about a simulation, it's more so about survival. We need to stop talking we're just always victims waiting to be rescued and start claiming our power even within unjust systems, because there's ways to do it even if you're not the type who's a Malcolm X, and it's not everyone is cut out for like, violence and things like that, but there's ways to stand up for yourself. And I could sense that the facilitators, they were taken aback and they were trying to reiterate that the power imbalances and the history of racism and how it shaped. And it's like, I get all of that. And it's like, mind you, I'm older than some of them. Not to say, not to be ageist, and I'm not that old myself, but I've studied all of these things. I've seen how they played out even in my family structure at times. And I just don't agree with that absolute language of we're always powerless. And if you just open up to another perspective, I believe that it can work out, because I even use examples. My mother is dark skinned. The lady on the TikTok, she's an unambiguous dark skinned Black woman. And this worked for her. And I'm not saying that this will work 100% of the time, but I'm just letting you know that the issue of using absolute language of never, and white people always have the power and this will never work, and Black people are always at the brunt, it's not going to work when we have conversations about race. So now, racism doesn't go away by us pretending we have none. So what is the Mixed Muse about? It's about modeling nuanced racial conversations grounded in faith, self-awareness, and empowerment. I'm here to heal the argumentative, broken souls who project their pain onto others. I want people of all races to see racial identity as both a spectrum and a social construct, something you can engage with consciously. And I want viewers to understand that mixed people can be allies to the Black communities without shrinking or pandering. This channel is a space for depth seekers, people who value tradition and legacy, and those who want to thrive in multicultural societies. The voices I carry are varied. I speak about my Jamaican mother who's been exoticized, my father who often leans white in people's eyes, my siblings who wrestle with colorism and identity, my white grandmother who loved to cross color lines but had her own biases. I also come from Caribbean and Latino cultures that celebrate admixture. I honor the overlooked histories of grifts, quadroons, and marabouts. And I'm inspired by thinkers, artists, and activists who are tired of victim narratives and ready for nuance. And I refuse to define myself purely through trauma or structural oppression. Identity politics can be limiting when they reduce us to victims. I can love and honor Blackness without rejecting my mixed heritage. Being multicultural isn't betrayal, it's kind of building bridges. And I want to normalize mixed people living fully in their identities without being forced to choose a side. Our mantra here is courage with grace. We're going to say the hard stuff with love and clear solutions ahead. That means we don't engage in endless arguments on this channel. I'm not here to debate with energy vampires. We welcome respectful questions and open minds, not trolling. And everyone of every color is invited to explore racial identity with care. And yes, mixed people can be allies to Black communities while still loving every part of themselves. There's room for everyone at the table. Let's lean into the discomfort, listening deeply, speaking from our own experiences, and staying open to learning. Remember, race conversations can be triggering because they touch our need for belonging and fear of being misunderstood. But those triggers can lead us to growth, healing, and deeper connection. Your identity isn't just the labels you're given, it's the stories and histories you carry and how you choose to weave them into your life. If this message resonated with you, Please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. From yours truly at the Mixed Muse, stay sharp, stay tuned, and keep musing.